Republicans are very much against everything that Obama and this Congress has done. And being very much against something can be a very powerful motivator. And as a Republican running for office, you are in a powerful position. If you're able to say all of this stuff, all of these things that have passed since Obama's been president, these are evil, bad, awful things. We've got to get out and vote these terrible people out of office who have done these terrible things. It's a powerful political decision. And here's why it is awkward for Republicans right now. Their claim to fame this election cycle, their party platform, in fact, is how bad everything is that the Obama administration has passed. And yet, they keep also campaigning on all the awesome stuff Obama has done. They just don't mention that President Obama is the one who did it. We saw this when the stimulus was passed over massive Republican objections. Remember when Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal toured his state handing out giant fake checks? He actually put his own name on a bunch of jumbo Publishers Clearinghouse style checks and distributed them around Louisiana so it would look like federal stimulus money was actually coming from him, because he wanted to be seen as anti-stimulus, but he also wanted to take credit for all the things the stimulus was funding in his state. And it wasn't just Bobby Jindal. There were dozens of these guys. More than 100 Republican lawmakers who came out against the stimulus and then proceeded in some way to try to take credit for it. We talked about this lots and lots on the show because there were lots and lots of them. Here's one of my favorites. This was Congressman Phil Gingrey of Georgia talking about the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad stimulus, which he, of course, voted against.
The vaunted Democratic stimulus bill has failed to stimulate anything other than a few federal bureaucrats.
Sounds bad and dirty. According to Phil Gingrey, the stimulus failed to stimulate anything but bureaucrats. He also called it a boondoggle and a dismal failure. Except, here's Phil Gingrey handing out a big, fat, fake check full of stimulus money to the good people of Cedartown, Georgia. You know, it's fine if you are super psyched about what the stimulus funds have done for your congressional district or for your state. It is also fine if you're totally against the stimulus and you want to inveigh against how terrible and bad for America the stimulus is. But you cannot simultaneously inveigh against the stimulus and take credit for all the great stuff the stimulus does. Or I guess you can if you are incapable of embarrassment. But it's not just the stimulus. This year, Republicans, of course, are really campaigning hard against the evils of Obamacare. It's not just a conservative movement line, it's a mainstream Republican politician line. Republican candidates far and wide are campaigning on a promise to repeal Obamacare. Republican governors and attorneys general in 22 states are suing the federal government to stop Obamacare. And that is also very awkward because while they are all campaigning against Obamacare, while they're making a big show out of suing against evil Kenyan Obamacare, they are also lining up to please join Obamacare programs, to please get some of its benefits. AP reports that 7 of the states suing the administration to stop health reform have also just had their requests approved to get big, fat Obamacare checks, to get one of the benefits of the health reform bill, a subsidy for health insurance for people retiring early before they qualify for Medicare. Each one of those states applied for and was approved to receive federal insurance subsidies for retired workers, money that comes directly from the health reform law that they are all suing to stop. In other words, we think this health reform thing is evil and bad and unconstitutional, and please can we have a piece of it? When Arizona's Attorney General refused to sue the administration over health reform, Governor Jan Brewer, where have I heard that name before? She went around him and filed suit anyway, saying she needed to protect the people of Arizona from health reform. Idaho Governor Butch Otter proudly became the very first Republican governor in the country to sign a law stating his intention to defy health reform. Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels cast himself as a hero for suing to stop health reform.
This is about protection of the of our rights and liberties in this country, and of course about pushing back against a very, very ill-advised bill that we're all going to suffer from.
Sounds better with music behind it, right? Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal peeked out from one of those oversized fake stimulus checks to say that he, too, was suing to block health reform. He said he was doing it because health reform scared him. Michigan's Republican Attorney General, Mike Cox, joined the lawsuit to stop health reform over the loud objections of his own Democratic governor, Jennifer Granholm. Nebraska's Republican Governor, Dave Heinemann, told education groups in his state, education groups, that health reform is a direct direct threat to their funding, somehow, bizarrely. When he joined the lawsuit, Nevada Governor Jim Gibbons called health reform sick, which is really something coming from Jim Gibbons. But for all of that grandstanding about how fiercely they are fighting the evil health reform that they call Obamacare, all of those states are lining right up to get the benefits of it. And again, it comes down to this. You can't apply for subsidies under President Obama's health reform plan to get people covered in your state who otherwise would have a really hard time getting insurance. You can do that. You can also inveigh against Obamacare being the death of the republic. You cannot do both. You cannot do both unless you are incapable of feeling embarrassed. And it's not just states that can apply for these health reform subsidies. It's also companies. Big employers can apply for this money to help fund insurance for their retirees. And you really want to talk about who is not embarrassed by doing this? Look at this. Uncovered this week by the folks at Think Progress. It turns out Koch Industries is one of the companies who applied for and got a piece of that health reform subsidy. Koch Industries? Really? Koch Industries hopping on the health reform gravy train after funding almost all of the most over-the-top apocalyptic anti-health reform campaigning? Do you remember all the signs in the tour buses with the bloody handprints? Hands off my health care! Remember the anti-health reform rallies comparing President Obama to Pol Pot and Hitler?
As I recall, Stalin in the 1920s issued about 20 million end-of-life orders for his fellow Russians. Pol Pot did it during the Vietnam War. He issued about 2 million end-of-life orders. Adolf Hitler issued 6 million end-of-life orders. He called his program the final solution. I kind of wonder what we're going to call ours.
That version of anti-health reform organizing, that event and others like it was brought to you by Koch Industries funded Americans for Prosperity. Koch Industries also funded FreedomWorks, the group that took credit for, in their words, blowing up town hall events last summer after encouraging conservatives to show up at town halls and to be aggressive. Koch Industries has done more than almost any other giant pile of inherited money in this country to convince Americans that health reform is a secret plot on the part of Kenyan Nazis to kill our grandparents and enslave our doctors. And Koch Industries has also applied and been approved for a program to help it insure its retiring workers, a program that exists because of the dreaded Obamacare. And you know, the Koch brothers can do whatever they want with all the money they got from Dad. They have the right to spend it on all sorts of stuff within the bounds of election law. But you can either inveigh against Obamacare as the second coming of Pol Pot, or you can apply for it to help cover insurance costs for your older workers. You can't do both. At least most people could not do both. Most people would find that too embarrassing. Joining us now is Howard Fineman, MSNBC political analyst and chief political correspondent and the senior editor of Newsweek. Howard, thanks very much.
Hi, Rachel.
Does it undercut the fist-shaking campaigning against health reform for states that are suing the government over this to be signing up for it?
Well, it should, but not only are some politicians incapable of feeling embarrassed, a lot of people who attend their rallies can't feel embarrassed either, or don't have the gene that produces the emotion of shame in the human soul, because having been to the healthcare town halls last year, having been to lots of Tea Party rallies last year and this year, I can tell you that if you individually talk to most of the people there, and I got to know a bunch of them, they're for Social Security, they're for Medicare, they like their interstate highway system to be fixed. Their kids are getting federally subsidized student loans. This is, sadly, I guess, in the American grain. A lot of people complain about the federal government. They say, get the federal government off our backs. In many cases, the federal government has their back. It's just that people don't want to admit it. And that emotion is the emotion that's very strong in the country now, and that the Tea Party people and the Mitch Daniels of the world are playing to.
Is it clear to you at this point that hate the stimulus, hate health reform, that those things are going to be really central to the Republican campaigning template this year?
Well, Rachel, there are rings to this and levels to it. The Republican leaders in the House and the Senate, people like John Boehner, whom I interviewed last week and wrote about in Newsweek, and Mitch McConnell, who I've covered for years, they're going to stick to three main issues. And they've poll tested them, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at the polls and see what they are. Jobs, spending, and health care. Those are the three words that they repeat, that Boehner repeated, must have repeated 15 times in the interview that we did. Jobs, spending, and health care. That means the stimulus bill, even as you point out, they benefit from and have big checks about. It means the idea that the government is somehow a runaway spending freight train when... Take Mitch Daniels, for example. He's now the governor of Indiana. When he was OMB director, people tend to forget, in the George W. Bush administration, he turned a surplus under his watch into a $400 billion deficit. I mean, George W. called him the blade. He was more like the butter knife, and now he's complaining about spending. And then you have the health care law, which, because Obama set it up in such a way that many of its important features don't come into play till 2013 or 2014, it's hard for voters to see immediate benefits from it. Ironically, one of the first immediate benefits is the category of things that Mitch Daniels and others are signing up for right now. That's what they're going to campaign on, while meanwhile the Cooks of the world and Rush Limbaugh and Mark Levin and all these people are going to be talking about birth certificates and Kenya and Christianity and all that stuff. The Republicans in the House and Senate will try to keep the high ground, while the others will do the dirty work around the side.
And then the real question will be whether or not Democrats can figure out a way to tell all those retirees who are going to be benefiting in these states that what they're benefiting from is only there despite what Republican politicians have fought against. Howard Feineman, MSNBC political analyst, Newsweek chief political correspondent, senior editor, and somebody who I really enjoy having on this show. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Rachel.